What's up, guys, and welcome to my favorite video game. My name is Josh Gallegos. I'm going to be your host for pretty much every one of these episodes, so today and every other day going forward. But let's jump into it this week. We're going to be breaking down the news, the top 3 news stories of the week. A lot of different things going on, mostly big releases more than anything. Not so many giant moves, per se. All the talk is around the games nowadays, so people are keeping the news kind of held up for later in the semester, rather. But right now, we have at least a few headlines, and it'd probably be a good time to kind of break some of these down. Of course, these are the quarterlies, so financials are the biggest stories that we're going to be seeing. And if we talk about financials, of course, we got to talk about my favorite company in video games, Nintendo. Nintendo's financials are looking pretty good. Now, I know financials aren't everyone's favorite thing, but it's always nice to see some good news, and that's what we have here from Nintendo. And, of course, there are other financials released. We'll see some information from Sony later. EA also has some breakdowns on a few websites if you want to go look at that. But I'd like to really break down this particular headline here from GamesIndustry.biz, written by James Batchelor. Nintendo profits are up after Switch Lite shifts 1.95 million units in first 11 days. The platform holder's operating profits are up more than 50% to $867.4 million for first half of fiscal year. So they're making the big bucks over there on Japanese island. Nintendo's latest financial results show growth across the board, boosted in part by the launch of the Switch Lite. For the 6 months ended September 30th, 2019, the company reported net sales of $443.97 billion whatever that is, the Japanese thing, $4.1 billion, a year-on-year increase of 14.2%. Profit saw bigger boosts, with operating profit rising by 53.4% to $94.2 billion I should probably figure out what that is. $869.1 million, and ordinary profit up 32.1%. Total hardware, my goodness, sales reached 6.93 million units during the 6-month period, up 36.7% when compared to the year before. Naturally, and I was about to say this, but I'm glad that the article got to it. Naturally, the bulk of this was driven by the regular model of the Switch, which sold 4.98 million units, but the new Switch Lite, their new handheld, which they released this year, managed to shift 1.95 million units, despite only launching 11 days before the end of the fiscal half. This brings the lifetime sales for the Switch up to 41.67 million units, with 246.01 million games sold. Oh my goodness. Sales for Switch are up, boys and girls. Who knew that Nintendo's hybrid console, this concept that people thought potentially could be dying thanks to mobile games, iPhones everywhere, and the failure of the Vita, the fact that you could actually do not only a handheld console, which makes sense with the idea of the 3DS, but a hybrid family console that tricks people into getting it as if that was like the Wii these days. And with the amount of functionality that's built into it, it basically is the same appeal as the Wii, even with Ring Fit Adventure going on. But we can see here the numbers showing that, and Nintendo is profiting greatly. And it's great to see. Oh, and here we have some breakdowns of software. Good to see this as well. Thank you, GamesIndustry.biz. Software sales for H1 reached 51.49 million units, with all 3 of Nintendo's major new releases selling more than 2 million units apiece. Sweet. Super Mario Maker 2, obviously, was the leader with 3.93 million units, but Link's Awakening wasn't too far behind with 3.13 million. Link's Awakening there sneaking in. All the more impressive, given the former was released in June and the latter was released in September. That's true. That means in the same amount of time, or in less time, that it has made almost the same amount. Fire Emblem Three Houses also performed well at 2.29 million units, although this was less than the 2.32 million that Evergreen Mario Kart 8 Deluxe managed. Wow. So even this year, Mario Kart 8 pulling in big bucks for Nintendo. And that's because anyone who buys a Switch is going to buy Mario Kart. So any kind of sales on hardware units are going to be reflected in Mario Kart sales. It's kind of crazy how that works. But that's how solid of a game it is, and that's how high the attach rate is for that kind of game. Nintendo reports the number of Switch titles to pass 1 million sales during the financial year, including third-party games, is now up to 11. The platform holder also reports digital sales of 1.6 billion. So to re-explain what that just said, the number of titles to pass 1 million is up to 11. Digital sales are up 83% year on year. This was attributed to the steady growth in sales for downloadable games, plus, and this is kind of a big plus, Nintendo Online subscriptions, which I'd be curious to see how many of those they actually get. I don't know if we have this number. There was a rare insight in the company's mobile business with revenues from its smartphone titles. Oh yeah, that's true as well. They have lots of big smartphone titles that are coming and bringing in the big bucks as well. $9.9 billion, $183.6 million. It did not detail how this was split between the previous release titles and new releases Mario Kart Tour and Dr. Mario World. Very interesting. Wow. No mention of new titles. They haven't talked about Luigi's Mansion 3 or Pokemon Sword. Obviously, they haven't talked about their mobiles. And then the hardware report for ongoing 3DS sales was down 62.9% year on year, which means that they're killing themselves a little bit with the Switch and the Switch Lite, but they're making it back almost exponentially in what they're gaining in the sales, hardware, both, and software. There were no changes to forecast for the fiscal year. Nintendo still expects to net sales of 1.25 trillion, I think that's yen, I don't want to say it off the top of my head, or $11.5 billion, an operating profit of 260 billion, maybe yen, and $2.4 billion. Both up 4.1% year on year. That means they're doing well, boys and girls. They're doing just fine. Do not worry about Nintendo, and do not count Nintendo out. The tried and true video game mantra. Regardless of the president, the heart of the company passes on and moves forward, and it's beginning to show the benefits of that and the fruits of it even here. Good for you, Nintendo. Glad for your success, and I have definitely attributed to that in more ways than one. I think another way that this is going is because of the reality of people are just getting the Switch now. Like, it's clicked with them. No pun intended. But it has. Like, there's been a click in people's minds about what the Nintendo Switch is, what it can do, and with the amount of different games, because that's the other thing that's clicked, is the developers have realized what the Nintendo Switch is and what it can do. With the amount of games that are being released on the system, it is an easy buy for anyone who's even mildly interested in even one of the titles. You can take it on the go with you. You can plug it into your TV. It looks great. It plays well. It all makes sense. It's intuitive. It's a great system. So it's paying off not only financially, but also in capturing what gamers love, you know? It's like the perfect little gamer package. And they're seeing the benefits of that. Number 2 on our news breakdown down this week. Death Stranding released. I know this is not necessarily a news item, but it is a news item, boys and girls, because it is Death Stranding we're talking about. Typically, I'd consider that just a game release, but this is Death Stranding. Batten down the hatches. Kojima has given himself a place in the history books, boys and girls, because of this game. So let's see what's going on with the reviews. And I have an awesome breakdown from Reset Era, a fantastic online thread-based community where people are talking about things all the time and putting together posts. And it's really Awesome to see the different forums that are in there and whatnot. And here in particular, they have an entire thread and forum for the Death Stranding reviews. So let's look at these and see exactly what's going on here on Reset Era. Final predictions, looks like people were voting that it'd be around 90 to 94, maybe 85 to 89 in scoring. And oh my, they have a really weird picture of Norman Reedus from Walking Dead, who plays in Death Stranding, on the front of this. That's kind of funny. Anyway, Tomorrow in Your Hands. Yes, of course. This thread is best enjoyed listening to help me by What? Okay, so they're giving music? That's interesting. Music suggestions while you read the thread. Dope! Okay, enjoy your time. Metacritic for the game. Right now, it's at 84. 84. That sounds about right. OpenCritic, 86. GameSpot, 9 out of 10. This is Death Stranding, Kojima's big release. Death Stranding is a hard game to absorb. There are many intertwining threads to its plot, and its silly names, corny moments, and heavy exposition belie an otherwise very simple message that comes through much more clearly in the game's more mundane moments, when you find a desperately needed ladder left behind by another player, or receive a letter from an NPC thanking you for your efforts. It's positive without ignoring pain. In fact, it argues in both its story and its gameplay that adversity itself is what makes things worth doing and life worth living. It's a game that requires patience, compassion, and love, and it's also one we really need right now. That from GameSpot. That is actually a fantastic review. And right underneath it, from IGN, the two heavy hitters, a 6.8. Much lower score. Certain landmark games in recent years, like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Red Dead Redemption 2, have managed to successfully tread the line between the rigidity of realism and the exhilaration of pure escapism. But much like its stumbling protagonist, Death Stranding just can't consistently get the balance right, despite possessing equally lofty ambitions and countless inventive ideas. There is a fascinating, fleshed-out world of supernatural science fiction to enjoy across its sprawling and spectacular map, so it's a real shame that it's all been saddled on a gameplay backbone that struggles to adequately support its weight over the full course of the journey. It's fitting that Kojima Productions' latest is so preoccupied with social media-inspired praise, because in some ways, I did, quote-unquote, like Death Stranding. I just didn't ever love it. Harsh words from IGN there. Let's read a couple more of these and then we'll be done. But Death Stranding, guys, it's interesting to kind of see these different breakdowns. Okay, this guy really liked it from Next Gen Basis, 9.5. Death Stranding is a weird game. It won't be for everyone, but if you can find something to like in the relatively slow start, you'll love it by the end. Typically, Kojima for better and for worse, it's a story about reconnecting people through... Oh, typically Kojima for better and... Okay, so he meant like, it's like Kojima for better or for worse, but it's a story about reconnecting people through the eyes of a bystander that becomes much more than that. Technically and visually outstanding, it's going to be there on my Game of the Year list for sure. A weird but wonderful game. That was a lame review. Sorry, Next Gen Basis, but lame review. Game Informer, 7 out of 10, and this will be our last one. Oh, actually, we'll read the one below this as well. Try as it might, Death Stranding's story doesn't shore up its faults. It's the normal Kojima mix of twists and turns, tropes, and overbearing themes. But at least I like that it explores real-world topics like the theory of multiple dimensions and key events in the history of the planet's biodiversity. Like Sam himself, I often wasn't sure why I kept going in Death Stranding. Maybe there's a little bit of pride in another task checked off the list, another job done. Unfortunately, this added up to little reward in the end. And this, the final review we'll read, because of the score, I'm just curious. It's from Stiviver, a 3.5 out of 10 for Death Stranding. The problem with Death Stranding is that Hideo Kojima has become wholly self-sufficient, making something I'm sure he considers a masterpiece. Death Stranding is anything but, with its head so far up its own ass, it's almost funny. It has 4 title cards in total, popping up as you play, and will roll 2 complete sets of credits before you finish. It goes on and on and on, thinking, falsely, that you're enthralled in what's occurring. If this is the type of project that Kojima insists to make, I suggest he move from games to TV shows or feature films. Being weird for the sake of weirdness isn't enough. While Kojima hopes to hit the same level of work as David Lynch or Sam Lake, if we want to keep it in the same industry, he falls very short. Even if Death Stranding's narrative was good, and it's not, a game needs to have actual gameplay. What you find within is abysmal, frustrating, tedious, and beyond repair. And it is to be avoided at all costs. That from Survivor, who just sounds like they don't like Kojima games. That's what it sounds like. But Death Stranding, ladies and gentlemen, up to you whether you're going to buy it. For my own impressions, just reading this stuff, I'm not going to get the game. I actually kind of decided this even when I was watching the trailers. I just didn't think it'd be fun. From what I was seeing, it was mostly that delivery boy, right? And nothing else was shown. And from what I understand, there are some more gunplay aspects introduced later as you get into it. But for the most part, you're just traversing from point to point. And the idea is more like subliminal, more heady than anything. So for me, I get it. It's a cool concept. I don't need to play it, at least not right now. I'll wait till it's cheap, then I'll pick it up. As for you, whatever you think. If you want to read some more reviews, go for it. Reset era threads are great for that sort of thing. But Death Stranding nonetheless released this week, boys and girls, and my oh my, how controversial. And you know, it's interesting to see the trend of games that are controversial being released in September. Last year we had, in the fall season, Last year we had Red Dead Redemption 2, and now we have Death Stranding, which are very similar games, actually, in the tedium behind them and the intense level of production and the level of anticipation. And maybe this is a trend going forward as games begin to mature. We begin to see these giant blockbuster moments and hits that are coming out and really making indelible marks on the industry. With that in mind, we also have, of course, other games released this week that we won't be able to get to. Luigi's Mansion 3, a game that I will definitely be picking up. And Call of Duty Modern Warfare, a huge release, which has already sold gangbusters. I believe it sold more than Joker was the headline that I saw, which, of course, makes sense because video games just cost more. In any case, and there's my phrase. Let's jump into the next news topic. PS4. Now, the second best-selling console ever, and that from IGN. Thank you, IGN, for this list breakdown. So we're going to have a list here from IGN, the top 15 best-selling video game consoles of all time. And with this, we're actually going to close out the podcast because I actually had an issue with my mic, and I'm recording from my phone. So I really want to optimize what we have and do the best with the equipment, but I really don't want to overshoot my limits and do something that's going to cost more than it's worth audio-wise. So let's go ahead and just do this last news topic, and then I will be throwing in a couple of potential extra videos this week on the YouTube channel that are exclusive to YouTube. Be checking out for those. Those will be a little more detailed in their editing and maybe a better watch for people who are interested in that kind of content. With that in mind, let's jump into the top list of video games or video game consoles sold of all time. That was a really bad way to put that. Okay, let's go straight into it. At number 15, the Xbox One at 41 million. So a current gen console already breaking the top 15. That's interesting. Obviously, the consoles are dead analogy that was being thrown around at the end of the PS3 era is a lie. At number 14, the Nintendo Switch, again, modern era, already up there. And of course, we just saw the Nintendo financials. They are killing it. At number 13, the SNES, the Super Famicom. The original back in the day, of course, released on November 21st, 1990. It has not been produced in a while. And some of their biggest rated games were Super Mario World 2, Chrono Trigger, and Super Metroid. At number 12, the NES, 61.91 million. Interesting. Number 11, the Nintendo 3DS. Number 10, the PlayStation Portable. On number 9, the Game Boy Advance. Okay, so they're including handhelds. I didn't realize that they were including those. Number 8, Xbox 360. Okay, so last gen. Number 7, PlayStation 3, last gen. Number 6, Nintendo Wii, 101 points. Okay, so we're getting into the hundreds, millions of units sold. So these are the big boys. At number 6, the Wii. At number 5, the PlayStation, 102 million. The original PlayStation. Good on you. The PlayStation 4 at number 4. And this is the big deal. Already, within this dev cycle, PlayStation 4, or within this console cycle, the PlayStation 4 is at number 4 best consoles sold. So as far as Sony financials are going, yeah, they're doing pretty good too. And that is pretty evident with their selling of the PlayStation 4. Number 3, the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color at 118 mil. Makes sense. Handhelds have always sold incredibly well. Obviously, number 2, the Nintendo DS. 154 million units sold. Number 1, and the biggest and best console, or as far as sales are concerned, the PlayStation 2. My oh my. Looking at these numbers, I did not realize how well Sony sells consoles. They do it well, and they're at number 1 right now with their PlayStation 2. And good on them for that. These console numbers, of course, mean nothing in the end, and maybe this is just trivial data. But we could spend hours talking about the reasoning behind these numbers and the reasoning behind why these different consoles were successful, the business decisions that were made, the concepts that were created, the ideas that were taken to fruition, the ideas that failed. We could look at the opposite end of the spectrum and see the consoles that failed as well. What was happening at the time in the culture, different impacts that different things had. It's a great, great subject to dive into, and there's so much meat that we could munch on tonight, but we will not, for unfortunately we are out of time. Thanks for listening to My Favorite Video Game this week. This is going to be, of course, a shorter podcast covering only the news. Jumping into next week, we'll be covering, of course, our favorite video game pick of the week, as well as other impressions of games that we're playing. For now, be looking out for our next post on our blog, and, of course, for clips on YouTube. This is Josh Gallegos. Have a good night.